Hey, are you ready to grow your business? You have checked out the number one resource for business leaders, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and managers. And we're going to teach you how to grow and scale your business with real actionable steps. There's no fluff in this podcast. It's just good advice. Check out this episode. If you're a first-time listener, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode is with Darshan Mehta, who's the founder of iResearch.com. If you've ever been wondering how do you have those real, honest conversations with your customers, and more importantly, how you get that valuable feedback for your customers in terms of what they think about your product, your service, or any other things that you're offering, iResearch.com is the platform that does that. It's pretty amazing. We talk more about it today, and we talk about why it's so important as business owners to have that consistent, valuable feedback loop with your customers. Stay tuned. We're getting into it today. Here comes your good advice. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. So you may be thinking about in your business, hey, how do I actually talk to my customers? More importantly, how do I talk to people who can give me insights on the direction my business needs to go? A lot of times when we're thinking about our new sexy entrepreneurial idea or our new startup, we go to our best friend, we go to our mom, we go to people who we know love us and like us, and they'll tell us, hey, it's great. You do it, you make it happen. But many of us wonder, okay, what do unbiased people think? How do I actually do the market research I need to do to actually get my business in a place where it can actually start to make some money? We're going to be talking about that today. I'm sitting down with Darshan Mehta. We're going to be talking about his business, iResearch.com, that he started back in 1998. He's been in business for over 2 decades. He's also the author of the book, Getting to Aha, Today's Insights Are Tomorrow's Facts. He's also been an adjunct professor pretty much all over the world, from France to Switzerland to Washington, D.C. And we're going to be digging into the journey of not just his startup and the awesome things he's been doing with that, but more importantly, some of the insights that you can take along the way. Darshan, it's great to have you on the show today.
Hey, it's great to be here, Blake. I really am excited to talk to you.
I am as well. And tell me, first of all, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Washington, D.C. currently.
Okay. So how's the weather?
It's good. It's usually pretty awful heat, but right now it's pretty good. And having a good summer so far.
I didn't know if it was just miserably hot where I am or if it's if it's other places too. So
well, actually the last year and a half I've been spending in Thailand.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is cool. I was reading about your bio. I was seeing that you've taught all over the place. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, that has to be such an exciting part of your journey.
Sure. This kind of related back into how I got into this as well, as I've always enjoyed when I was in college, case studies, like solving problems.
Yeah.
And I often notice that a lot of times you're given all these facts, figures, and numbers, but the real key is discerning through all that noise and getting to what's really causing the problem. Because once you identify the problem, then you can start working on solutions. So having said that, I decided I just wanted to do that when I got out of college, and I decided to go into consulting. And that led to me actually getting into market research and solving problems, because I like the variety of problems. I don't really mind problems. I just love solutions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the market research world, I mean, this is something that everyone dips their toe in at some point whenever they're trying to grow their business, especially if they're a startup, they're trying to validate their idea. It feels like, I think of it like, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. It's like the post iPod world where, everything we want it now. Like we just, like the iPod, you can just scroll and like you can just have your music, right? As opposed to like flipping through like the Rolodex binder thing. But it almost feels like everyone wants the answer to what their customers want and literally in a heartbeat. And it feels like there's a lot of bad advice on this. Talk to me about the market research game and maybe more specifically, why did you start iResearch?
So insights are, I think, the real key. And that's where he basically is a differentiator. We live in a very hyper competitive world. You're not only competing with the person next to you, it's the person in your state, in your country, and even now internationally.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do you differentiate yourself? The good news is there's always ways to differentiate, right? But the key is, how do you differentiate so that you basically can, customers say, hey, I like what you're offering and I'm willing to pay for it, right? And that's the ultimate getting to product market fit for entrepreneurs is getting there. And even well-known companies that we know now, they didn't have that initial product market fit until they started talking to customers. But Airbnb is a perfect example. Do you know their story?
No. We both work in like the entrepreneurial startup world. Everyone has like their version, right? Of like, but it's more like ego. It's like, well, we're basically Airbnb, and so, yeah, no, tell me the story.
Well, they started out in Texas to basically, they wanted to go to a conference they couldn't go to, and they realized, hey, maybe we can rent somebody else's rooms and stuff. But long story short, they were actually, I think, at Y Incubator, and someone told them, look, go talk to your customers, because their biggest market was New York at the time, but they just weren't getting to where they wanted to. So they actually flew out to New York, and they actually sat down with real customers that were posting, and they realized one of the things that they were just not doing well was putting on good pictures. So they just gave them better ways to put on better pictures and do it. And within a week, they more than doubled their sales on Airbnb.
This is pretty amazing. I mean, it's, and I love what you said at the beginning. Like there are simple concepts to business, and yet we make things so complicated. Right. So I think everyone listening understands this concept of, just need to go talk to my customers. They'll give me the insights I need. Why does it feel like we're so hesitant to actually talk to our customers, or why does it feel so clunky sometimes actually sitting down in front of a buyer?
That's a great question. I think sometimes the simplest things seem like, oh, that's too simple, right? I think we just need to overcomplicate it. That way we're busy, we're doing something. But here's something that you can't avoid. And that is that one way or another, your marketplace is going to speak to you. Your choice is really, do you want to listen sooner or later? Right? And the sooner is, do you do that before you spend a lot of money, time, and investment and getting feedback? Or do you do it after you do all of that? And some people are really good at guessing in the dark and doing it, But others, like most of us, need a little bit more guidance from our customers to say, we can nail it right.
How often do you talk to owners who, frankly, their ego's in the way? Like they're getting the customer. I mean, I've heard owners where customers are basically pretty blatantly being like, I don't like your product. And owners being like, or founders saying, well, then you can buy someone else's, or you can go somewhere else, and like not bridge the disconnect of, well, they are going somewhere else. They are, you're broke. I mean, how often does that ego factor play in?
I think often, right? I mean, look, even with my products, it's your baby, right? I mean, you gave it birth, you're growing it, you want to make it, out in the world, you want it to do well, right? So I can understand that. But in all honesty, you're often getting the best feedback from those that are a bit more critical. And the reason is because they're actually thinking about your product and service and their needs, and they're saying, this just doesn't meet my needs. But if you truly listen to them, I think you could often tweak what you're trying to offer and make it even better.
Well, there's also like this comfortability with pivoting your product, like where you talk to your customers and the product you envision creating, there's this one little tiny part of it that your customers actually like. And that becomes, if you're willing, that can be the thing you pivot to that actually, explodes the revenue for your brand. I guess the question is, are they willing to be agile enough to make that pivot?
For example, recently I launched this Connect Quick app, and I started getting feedback. And one of the people said, I can't edit the picture. This sucks. It's a terrible app. Right. And so I'm going, of course that hurts. I decided to respond. I'm saying, well, tell me exactly what happened. Yeah. And, we do have this edit button here, but if you can't find it, let me know if there's a better way to do it. Long and short, the person found it. And not only that, he came back and said, oh, this is great. I love it. When's the full app going to go? So a lot of times people, again, are kind of reacting quickly. And instead of taking it personally, actually take that as a benefit, because they actually took the time to give you feedback.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people just walk away and you never hear anything.
Right.
They might tell 10 other people, but not tell you. And that's more harmful, right? But if they actually take the time to tell you whether it's positive or negative, put the personal ego aside and say, hey, what are they really saying here? And that requires you basically stepping out of your shoes into their shoes. And perhaps, we're not talking about facts, right? I mean, factually, the edit button was there in my app, right? We're talking about perception.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to manage perceptions. And quite honestly, I've often found that these types of people who give the feedback, they're your biggest opportunity to become super fans.
Wow. Okay. So let's drill into this concept of the super fan. Talk to me more about what you're getting at with that.
I would say there's a certain people that are really hypercritical about something, right? But those are often the ones that if you can meet or address that critique, they will become your super fan and say, wow, this now fits what I'm trying to do. I mean, a perfect example is Patagonia. I mean, the company was started because the owner felt like everything out there just sucked. And he was just a super hiker, naturalist going out there, and nothing met his needs. So he ended up saying, in this situation, making a product. And as a result, he has super fans because they identify with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, in getting to that point of the super fan, or I like to call them raving fans.
Sure.
People who will stand on top of a mountain and shout out your business name. I mean, they've drank the Kool-Aid on your behalf, I guess. Parsing through this feedback, is there any insight there around getting thick skin and becoming resilient to some, because people nowadays, I don't actually, maybe this has always been the case, but even on social media, on like your website page or what have you, not only will they give the feedback, but I mean, they'll write it in the most harsh.
Sure.
I mean, let's say this was the worst experience I've ever had, or, I mean, I've seen some things that are very like aggressive, where someone just had such a bad experience, a very visceral reaction. How can we as business owners develop that thick skin and frankly not take it personal so that we can lean in to those experiences and maybe even potentially turn them into a super fan?
Great question. I think the way I deal with it is saying, look, sure, I take it personal, but I'm not going to reflect that in what I'm writing and putting out publicly, right? Mm-hmm. So you take a step back, get over the emotion, and really think about what they're saying. And I think to a degree, you are going to get some more negative comments and some more passion in the internet. That's just going to be given. Are you going to make everyone a super fan? No. But you're going to make a certain percentage that will become super fan. And I think the best thing, whether it's positive or negative, I would highly encourage everyone to respond one way or another and maintain professionalism and try to keep the emotion out of it.
That's great advice.
As long as you keep the emotion out of it, doesn't mean they will or they won't. It's what you do, because ultimately you only control yourself. Right. So I think others will see that in the responses. But what happens if you don't respond to the negative stuff, then that can take on its own character and being without any response from the original creator or owner or brand. And that's where you lose control of the message. And you don't want to do that. As long as you say, look, and sometimes, look, you just make mistakes and own up and say, hey, we made a mistake. You're right. We'll fix it. People are looking for, authenticity in the fact that you're willing to listen and react, not just a one-way conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it seems like, there's so many opportunities to differentiate yourself, and even having those kinds of honest conversations can go a long way. It also seems like many of us I've talked to many entrepreneurs who are just starting out, who basically their perception of entrepreneurship is essentially, I don't want to fail. And so whatever I do, I want it to work immediately and from the get-go. It's almost like I'm stepping up to bat, and I literally have one pitch that I want to hit.
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about, just gonna say, the journey of entrepreneurship and like what it really looks like. I mean, is it this one and done? You knock the ball out of the park from the get go, or I mean, we know the answer. I mean, what
Well, even if you do knock it out of the park the first time, if you're a true entrepreneur, you're going to want another ball game. Right? So, and I think that's where we can talk about failing. What is exactly failing? Right? Is failing that you make a decision and it was a wrong decision, and let's say you trip and fall on your face? I would say that's not failing. I would say that's trying. Right? Mm-hmm. I think failing is not learning from that. Right? If you make the same mistake 2-3 times, now there's a common denominator. It's not the failing. It's you're not learning from it. Mm-hmm. And I think all these opportunities where you might make the wrong decision, and of course you're going to, nobody makes them all right. Those are all opportunities to learn, to change, and to adapt. So I think it's the definition of fail that one should really think about.
it feels like the people who've been in entrepreneurship, they have like a comfortability with this concept of, swinging and missing. But on the same token, it also feels like people have developed these entrepreneurial personas that it's like I got to be the next Steve Jobs, like I got to be the next, and it's like these celebrity-esque figures in their mind of, that's what I want to be. I guess sometimes rather than like really drilling in on like what does the customer want, like how does my product help them? How often have you seen?
I think you're spot on. I think a lot of people end up wanting to be an entrepreneur or want to pursue it because they see this in the news of so and so doing so well. But my advice would be find a real problem, solve a problem, and the rest will fall in place. Because if you think about it, really, I thought about this even for my products. If you can do one of three things, right, your chance of being successful are pretty good. And those three things are: one, save people time, save them money, or make it easy. If you can do one of those three things, you're going to most likely do well. However, if you can do two or three, I would argue you might even 3x your chance of being successful, right? Like if you can save people money, time, and make it easy, you're going to, I think, 3 times increase your chance to being successful.
Well, I don't want to be overly circular in our conversation, but I'm just thinking of like the disconnect between someone who's like, oh, this saves my customer so much time. And then they finally talk to them. And the customer's like, that doesn't even help me. I don't even want that. And so it's interesting, again, not to beat this horse any longer. But it's interesting, our perception versus our customers' perceptions in that disconnect sometimes.
Right. So. And ultimately, they need to be convinced that this is going to help them save time, money enough that they're willing to pay for it. Right. Mm-hmm. But there's one more element. It's 3 + 1, what I call. And the fourth element, and this is the X factor, is can you evoke an emotion? Right. If you can evoke an emotion, you're not going from 3x, you're going to potentially 6, 10x based on that emotion.
It's the power of messaging, the power of your brand.
I mean, I'll give you another example. I think Steve Jobs did it perfectly, right? I mean, they weren't the first MP3 player out there. But when they did, I think he saw what was happening in the technology. Drives were getting smaller and cheaper. And then he realized, why not come up with a concept where you can put 1,000 songs in your pocket? And I remember when he did that, it's like, what? Are you kidding me? I can put 1,000 songs in my pocket? Because before then, you're carrying around CDs and all this stuff. And that evoked an emotion. Right. And not only does this save time, money, and made it easy, but it also evoked an emotion like this is really cool. And then you throw in that flywheel, right?
Yeah. Well, there was, I remember, there was like a sense of pride with it too, where the sense of, you had your CD binder and you would flip through and choose, the CD you want. But I remember getting my first iPod and I'm not sharing it with anyone, but like for me, there was this sense of like, wow, like I get to have like everything's right there.
My whole collection.
And I was like, this is my collection. I remember getting on, back in the day when you'd have to get on iTunes and like sync sync it together. And, you're constantly adding to iTunes and, I think it's a great, you make a great point on drawing in the emotion factor.
Yeah. So I think one of the things people are doing these days, they're no longer buying products. They're buying experiences. There's many products out there.
Well, how does someone create that experience? Are we back to talking to your customers? How does someone really legitimately create? Because here's what I think about is I think about people who they go to like these answers without actually differentiating themselves. So like one of the things that drives me crazy when I talk to entrepreneurs, I ask the question like, why? Okay, so why would I buy from you? And the answer I always get, like 9 times out of 10, is customer service. And we give the best customer service. And I'm like, this cannot be true for everyone. When's the last time you truly had a memorable, authentic, like wowing experience when it came to a company and their customer experience? But yet we as business owners, like we hang our hat on what we're different. We do this. How do we authentically create this differentiated product that creates that experience?
Yeah, I think, first, a lot of people, you start with the product, right? But then at some point you need to step back and say, what's the total experience from the very first time someone contacts me to the time they research the product or find out the features and benefits to actually buying it, then actually getting it, and then actually opening the box or whatever, and that whole experience. You need to think about that total experience, because actually customer service begins at the very first point of contact, not after it's sold.
Right.
Not to say that's not important. That part is important, but the total experience of and there's so many ways to differentiate that. That's the beautiful thing, right? I mean, if you think about it, more and more companies now are seeing that. What's the experience of you opening the box? How's the packaging and so on? And so I think they're recognizing it, but there's a lot more that can be done there for sure.
Well, I love how you point out that it's not just about the point of sale, because a lot of times, many of us in the sales world, it is that point of sale. And if they're not ready to buy, a lot of people don't have the patience to stay with them. It's let me move on to the next person. And in many cases, once the money has changed hands, or, they've paid your Stripe account or what have you, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's that sale is done. Now let me move on to the next person to sell. So I love this concept that you're sharing of really the customer journey from the very first moment of connection, even to when maybe you offboard them, the deal is done and, they're moving on and, to whatever else they're moving on to.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the customer experience happens before they even made the decision to purchase, because chances are that experience is going to influence whether they buy or not.
Yeah.
And then if it's a really expensive item, what happens to a lot of people, there's sometimes buyer's remorse, right? Like, oh no, should I have spent the money? Should I have done that? So that's where, the rest of your experience comes into play. Follow up. Is there anything we could do to help you to enjoy the experience and so on? Now, obviously you don't want to bug people, but nowadays you can control it to whatever level that they want and are interested in.
Yeah.
But I think you need to think about not just the product. Once you have a product, solve the problem, but now think about the total experience that people are going to have from the point of initial contact, whatever your marketing is and so on, to the point to actually learn about you, and actually interact with your product or service, and then actually post-purchase.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, we're getting towards the tail end of the conversation. I want to ask more personally about you.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about and we have people who are all over the place who are listening. They're entrepreneurs. They're thinking about their own business, and they love getting the insight on, who is this person and why did they step into the world of entrepreneurship? So take me back to 1998, starting iResearch. What happened? Why did you start the business?
So as I said earlier, I like doing projects of case studies and stuff. And so I decided I wanted to go into market research, because you get exposed to many different products and services, and ended up actually, I'm Indian originally, born in India. So I've been accused of having an extra tech gene. So at that point, I was looking at online research and online focus groups and surveys, and not much was being done at that time. And so I decided to do this. And this is before even Google. Yahoo was the search engine at that time. And at that point, everything was based on alphabetical order. But I realized if you had an exclamation in front of your name, you're at the very top. So that's how the name iResearch came about. But then I realized you can't get a domain name with an exclamation. So that's iResearch.
I love it. And it's almost, what's crazy is in hindsight, you had the iPod come out, and then now that prefix is so synonymous with convenience and
internet.
It's internet, it's personal, all these different things. So great job, seeing things in advance, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
well, that's part of the thing about insights, and my book, and one of the subtitle is Today's Insights Are Tomorrow's Facts. Because if you think about it, if you can get these insights before everybody else assumes it's a fact, you have such a head start before your competition. Mm-hmm. And it's true in everything. I mean, the world we take around as we know it now, at some point, this was an insight that someone had and created, right? I mean, podcasts didn't exist before, but now they do. And look how it's changed everything. Now everybody's, sure, podcasts are around. They weren't always around.
Yeah. And right? I mean, it's interesting, navigating that with other people's perceptions of it's like nowadays everyone has a website, right? And like you had a time period when people were like, well, I mean, do I really need that? Should I really have that? And even with social media, I think we went from, I remember the first time I met someone who I asked her, I said, what do you do for a living? She said, oh, I'm a social media manager. And I was like, is that a thing? Like what? And she was like, yeah, and I was like, this can't be real.
Right.
And now it's like, how you think about running a business, how could you not have some kind of social media involvement?
Well, I remember when the internet was a dial-up, and she went to a friend of mine, and she said, "Oh, this will never take off. It's terrible." And I agreed. It was slow, but the promise was there.
Is there any insight there to being ready for when these things happen, like when these developments happen? When the market shift, new innovations happen. I mean, is it just being ready, being able to pivot, being ear to the ground, listening? I mean, how does someone pick up on these insights to be ready to basically profit from it, not in a nefarious way, but to be able to pivot your business without being behind the 8 ball?
That's where you need conversations. And that's what the iResearch platform is about, is having conversations. I mean, for example, I feel very fortunate that I've been in the market research insights industry, because as a result, I feel like I have a plug into what I call the jet stream of society, right? And so you kind of have an idea of what things are happening. And I think part of also understanding what is an insight. A lot of times people confuse an insight as a fact or an observation. It's more than that. It's the combination of trends, social trends, technological trends, plus observations and facts all together. To give you an example, I think some of the best people who have insights are comedians, right? Because they're the types, you're sitting listening to this and you go, oh my God, that is so true.
Yes.
Yes, you're right. They do this and they do this. And oh yeah, that is an insight. And real smart comedians tap into that because they're really good observers of human nature, behavior, but also societal trends. And when they put it all together in a nice package and they give it to you, it makes you say, oh my God, that's so true. That is an insight.
I think the best example of this is Jerry Seinfeld, and watching Seinfeld and, they're a close talker or whatever it is. And then you've never heard anyone say this before, but you're just like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what that person means. I love your comment there. That's so spot on.
Because what, so many of our decisions, like even the experience, are not made by the conscious mind. It's made by the subconscious, right? And our subconscious mind processes a tremendous amount of information from visual to audio. And so a lot of these things we're thinking and feeling, but we haven't articulated or crystallized the thought. But that's when a comedian comes around and crystallizes that thought. And you say, oh my God, that's so funny. I've thought this, I felt this, or, that is an insight. So and those insights are all around us. And all you really need is conversations, And once you do that, you'll see that. I mean, honestly, you don't even need to worry about competitors because now you can become your biggest competitor.
And taking it back to our first conversation, this is so simple to understand. The question is for the listeners, will they actually step in and actually have these conversations and seek out these conversations? Or more importantly, maybe they should just hire you and your business to help facilitate it on their behalf.
Well, actually, I've been doing this for a while as a consultant, but now I'm actually setting up the platform and training people to do it on their own because they can do it on their own. And the thing is, it's better if they do. But I do think they have a couple of challenges. They have to overcome the bias nature. They have to be open to listen to positive and negative feedback, right? and to learn from that. But I think it can be done, and it can be done a lot faster and more affordably nowadays than ever as well. And that's the key because the insights are out there, and you just need to tap into them. And if you do this enough, you'll get better at it, and you'll see that it's just a whole new world.
Well, Darshan, this has been a wonderful conversation. It's been so fun. I've gained plenty of insights myself listening to you. For people who are listening themselves, they're thinking, okay, I want to connect with this person and maybe even work with this person. What's the next best steps for them?
The best way, they can register at www.iresearch.com, or they're welcome to send me a direct email at dm@iresearch.com.
Perfect. Darshan, this has been great. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, it was great talking to you, and it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Of course. Hey, for our listeners, I'm going to put the link to iresearch.com down in the episode description below. And also you can email Darshan directly at dm@iresearch.com. Hey, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy the podcast, what the heck are you waiting on? Click that subscribe button, click the follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you're at. And don't forget, if you love the podcast and you want to buy me a cup of coffee, you can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/good advice. You can also get your business advertised on the podcast in our introduction. Again, that's at our Patreon at patreon.com/good advice. Hey, we appreciate you. Thanks so much for the support. We love bringing you good advice. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'll catch you later. See ya.